All right, guys, welcome to today's webinar. We're going to continue our conversations on 20649, and I hope you've enjoyed this ridiculous quote. And because this is a compliance webinar and disclosures are everything, we should probably disclose this is not a direct quote from our SEC chairman, but it was generated by AI, so I think that makes it fairly close enough, but we definitely want to get that disclosure out there early enough. So unfortunately, we're here because we lost. To recap what's going on, in February of 2022, the SEC introduced 20649. It went through a couple of different comment periods. You can see the dates here of those comment periods. And ultimately, we now have 20649 on the SEC's final agenda with a final action sometime this October. Haven't seen any update yet. If there's any attorneys in the audience here that have followed it a little more closely, please feel free to chime in and I'll share whatever information you know. But it's coming. So we're going to talk about how we're going to prepare for that. For those of you that don't know me, we actually have quite a few new faces here, so that's always cool to get new people coming in. Those that don't know me, my name is Brian Hahn. I work at MTradecraft, and I work as a brain trust to mostly SEC registered firms on a wide range of cybersecurity and intelligence issues. I don't sell IT services, software, or anything of that nature. I work as a pure consultant with my clients. And today we're going to keep it positive and talking about 20649, and we're going to talk about the opportunities and the sophistication and how it's going to allow us to reallocate our finances, for the operations of the hedge funds and the RIAs out there in the world. So we'll talk about that today. And for those that don't know me, I've been on both sides of the table. First half of my career, I was on the operations side of RIAs and hedge funds and did a lot of this work for a firm. And the second half, roughly the past 10 years, a little more, I've been working just as a consultant with these firms. So we'll dive in today and talk about a few of these issues. I always like to pop this up for those that haven't read it. This is a great two-pager from the SEC about the different things that are going to be required and coming with 20649. So definitely give that a glance and look at our YouTube channel if you need more detail on any one of these sections. There's several videos where we dive into the different details. But that's always just a great reminder of what we're dealing with and what we're trying to put into place, at the compliance and operations level. So I'm going to pull a quote here. So when you read through 20649 and all 230 something pages, somewhere around page 71 or 72, you find a survey from the SEC where they expect each firm to spend roughly $2,348 per employee on cybersecurity. So to me, it'd be interesting where these stats come from. What was their average size firm they look at on here? In my mind, someone like a Goldman is going to be paying a fraction of this, whereas a single financial planner working from home is going to pay multiples of this, and almost unnecessarily so, which was a lot of our criticism throughout. So when we do these presentations and we show, the do-it-yourself stuff and how you guys can go and put some of this into the operations, I always come back to two pieces of software. We always use Nessus and Maltego, and I'm in no way affiliated with these companies. I pay the full retail price just like everyone else would. So I always say, hey, look, if you guys have a better option on how to do this or software that works better, please let me know. I'd enjoy the cost savings as well. But ultimately, we're looking at almost $6,400 in software needed at the operational level just for firms to be able to build the compliance documentation that the SEC is going to require. That's just a software cost. From there, you're either going to have to train current employees, hire new employees, or you can pull a third-party auditor in like MTradecraft to do that work. You can kind of see that's our business model right there. Is our prices are less than software alone, which is why third party works for a lot of people. But ultimately, those are the two pieces of software we always use in our demonstrations. And today I want to take a higher look at them and talk more about flow, because now, we know how to do these different things. We know how to do our vulnerability scans. We know how to build our policies and procedures manual. We've covered that in a lot of videos. I want to talk about how they all flow together and become a compliance machine that we can easily operate and task out. So you guys have probably seen this graph before, but again, it's just kind of a good reminder of what we're trying to do, right? So Nessus is going to go through and do all of our audits. It's going to configure. I mean, I've never run into a situation where I couldn't use Nessus to audit a particular cloud network, external network, internal network domain, you name it. Nessus has a plugin to do the audit. So each firm's going to be a little bit different. They're going to have a physical office. Some may not. You're going to have remote offices or remote employees. You're going to have web servers. You're going to have email servers. Each firm's a little bit different. And so we have to build a compliance program. We have to build a workflow that fits that firm and efficiently, gives us a way to build our compliance documentation from that. So, that's kind of the graphical, easy to look at map. In the real world, it looks like this. We've shown these Maltego graphs before, but for us, this is ultimately what I build for a client that says, this is our cybersecurity dashboard. This is what we're going to use to meet any of those SEC requests. Again, if you've got a better way to organize it, please let us know. But ultimately, this has been a pretty solid way for us to combine a lot of information, bring all of the necessary people into the conversation. When you read deep into the SEC regulations, we definitely want to show executive involvement. So this is an easy way to do that. This is kind of a high level. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because we've covered it in detail in other maps. But ultimately, when you zoom in on each one of those, it is a different piece of our puzzle. It's a system, it's a piece of software, it's an open port, it's a network, it's everything on that graph so that we know every intimate detail about our network. So let's talk about that in general. Okay, so when we're talking to clients, we really talk about cybersecurity compliance documentation in two different flavors. There's the procedural documents. That's going to be things like your policies and procedures manual. 20649 is going to have some new regulatory disclosures for us in the form of Form ADVC. And we're also going to need a written disclosure to clients on Form ADV. I believe it's Part 2A. That may change, but somewhere in that written brochure, we're going to need a written overview of the program. Proper cyber record keeping logs. So the logs, the reports, the audits that you do, we're going to have some record keeping requirements on that we'll touch on later. For each of my clients, I highly recommend having an employee technology usage agreement. It's literally a 2 or 3 page document between the firm and the employee that dictates how they can use the equipment, right? You can't take our laptop and go to Starbucks and get on public Wi-Fi and start trading client accounts. Whatever that looks like for you, have that in an employee technology usage agreement, and of course, cyber insurance policies. When we think about technical documents, for me, that's going to be things like your vulnerability scans, your cloud audits, your network maps. The SEC is going to be big on user access maps, right? Or any kind of document that shows your user access rights. In my mind, that means the owner of the firm has admin access everywhere, possibly the CCO as well, whereas the trader has access to trading, accounting has access to accounting. It just wants to show how access is broken down by operational procedures with the employees. In the risk and threat assessments, that's another big one that you're going to see. I should have mentioned earlier, but on our webpage, I keep an ongoing list of all the cybersecurity requests we've seen the SEC send clients. When you read through that, you're going to see a request for a written risk and threat assessment report. So that's a big one. That's one I see firms really struggle to put together. Those are all kinds of things that we want to think about in terms of the technical documents. And of course, cybersecurity training. For a while now, the SEC's been requesting evidence of training. So make sure you have that. But ultimately, for the way we staged this, the procedural documents are, for the most part, pretty static. We design them so that there's not a lot of changes that are needed to them. And in general, these are going to be reviewed on an annual basis to make sure that they still fit our program, they still fit our operations. Whereas our technical documents are going to be more ongoing. These may be weekly scans, they may be monthly scans, whatever, you know, that operational workflow looks like for your firm. So we want to build a compliance program that allows us to take these technical document workflows and then integrate them into our static documents so that, you know, anytime we do get a request from the SEC, or, you know, as the documents are used for, we're bringing an employee on board and we need to get them brought up with security procedures, we want to have a quick and efficient way to do that. So that's what we're going to focus in on today. A little more detail on what we're talking about. So when you look at 20649, it's going to talk about the policies and procedures manual, and it's even going to mention a few key items that need to be in that manual. So a table of contents for a manual that I would author might look something like this. You can see where the exhibits, those are generally going to be my technical documents. So, you know, for instance, in my policies and procedures manual, I'm going to describe how I take my inventory of devices, and I'm going to describe how I build my network maps, and I'm going to describe how I find my systems that contain personally identifiable information. And then in that policies and procedures, I'm going to say, and reference exhibit A1 to see that report, because that allows us to take those technical reports, build a workflow. We have an output of a document, a PDF, that we can then just put into a compliance folder and have it referenced by our static document. So in other words, every time we update our technical document, we don't have to jump in and update our static policies and procedures document. So there's always a way when you build this in you know, I have firms that'll come to us and say, hey, we just need a policies and procedures manual. Can you write that? And it's actually a lot more expensive and time consuming for me to write a policies and procedures manual just from the scratch, versus if I've done the technical documents first, if I've done the vulnerability scanning, the network mapping, the user access mapping. Now, all of a sudden, when I'm doing this, or when you're doing this as a CCO or the COO, you have all of that information in front of you, and it's easy to look at the information you have and then build your policies and procedures manual around it. It flows really smooth when you do it that way. So this is really the part that I struggle with about the new regulations. And for those that have followed, you know, I mean, the technical requirements of the new regulations really aren't that different from what the SEC was requesting anyway. And honestly, it's a little bit, it makes things a little bit easier because now we have them codified and rules and regulations, so we know exactly what the SEC is expecting. The part I really have a problem with is going to be the form, the part 2A and the form ADVC about cybersecurity, right? So the SEC wants to know everything. They want to know everything about your cybersecurity program, how you set it up, how you're monitoring it, how you're defending it. And then they want you to put that in a narrative description for your clients. And that narrative description has to include any perceived threats or past threats, okay? That's a sticky one. I've never come across a client, and I've done well over 250 audits. I've never come across a client where I didn't go back to him and say, hey, here is a threat we need to consider. Now, we don't necessarily need to be sharing that with clients. That's a tough one, because clients, if they are actually reading the Form ADV brochure, I guess that's always questionable. But if they are reading it, you know, are they going to have the same insight that we have? Of course, we're not going to leave an open vulnerability, but we certainly don't want to be describing everything to the client and running them off. Further, we don't want to be giving away details to the enemy. That's another one, you know. So I have a problem with Part 2A. I also have a problem with Form ADVC, which is going to be the mandatory incident reporting. So I believe we're looking at a 48-hour reporting period on this now. It's going to be submitted via Form ADVC. You know, I think a lot of the comment period people were, and if you've ever been in any of these, you know, kind of cyber investigations, they're quickly evolving. I mean, the thing you know from minute 1 is completely different from what you know at minute 5 versus what you know at 1 hour versus what you know at 48 hours. It's a quickly evolving chain. And then of course, you know, at 180 hours or whatever, that that scope and that knowledge constantly changes as you're building on that attack and figuring out what happens. So, this is essentially a form that's going to have to be filed frequently and updated frequently as you do incident reporting. If you've ever done incident response, you also realize in those first few hours, you go down a lot of false positives and looking and investigating different things. So, again, there's a lot of question here about how much we should be disclosing. And luckily, the attorneys are starting to speak up. I know we're kind of in some of the final stages of talking to attorney partners that are going to work with us and help with these Form ADV filings. Of course, disclosures being everything. I'm not an attorney, so that's definitely some information we want to get to you guys. But it's going to be interesting to see what kind of information we should be put in here. And even on my side of the things, on the information security side of things, we're starting to get webinars now rolling out where it talks specifically about the SEC and what we should be including in these public disclosures, because we're pretty much focused on RIAs today, but on the other side of the aisle, the SEC is rolling out similar regulations for publicly listed companies as well. So it's really great that we're starting to get a lot of lawyers chime in and figure out, what exactly should be put on these forms, how much should we disclose. That was always a question a little bit beyond my pay grade. So, I think as we see these final rules roll out, and as we start getting more input from, us not only listening to the legal peers, but also I think, bringing help in internally, it'll be interesting to see how this unfolds. But ultimately, and we've covered this in detail, I mean, this new regulation provides a lot of opportunities. So, we are essentially with Form ADV Part 2A and Form ADVCs, we are going to be disclosing everything to hackers. So our hope here is that we are giving hackers a sneak peek at all of our defenses and our operations, and we're hoping to leave them so impressed that they won't even try to hack us. Okay, that's what we're going to hope for. If you go on our YouTube channel, you'll see some of the risk and threat assessment videos we do. When you build these risk and threat assessments, we do what we call open source intelligence, or OSINT, and we're going and we're looking for all the public information about your firm. So I'm looking at past password breaches. Can I find any of your employees in past password breaches, and can I find their employees so that I can try to use those on your system? That's open source intelligence information. Part of that work for me now when I'm doing penetration tests is going to be going to your Form ADV, and this is going to be the same workflow that hackers are going to take. They're going to go to your Form ADV. They're going to read all about your cybersecurity procedures and your policies, and then they're going to craft their attack around that. If you've seen our phishing demonstration videos where we create a phishing email with a malicious PDF attached, one of the things that I look at is I'll go and I'll look at what documents someone has published on their website. And when I see what PDFs they've published, I can figure out what version of Adobe they're using. And then I can go into my malicious software and build an exploit that is direct for that version of Adobe. Because I've gained that insight, I know what version of Adobe you're using, and I can launch an exploit specifically for that. In a similar fashion, we're now giving hackers all of that information. They're going to know your defenses. They're going to know what brand of firewall you have, what software you're running, so that they can go and craft an attack that they know, for one, is either effective against that system, or two, they know is undetectable by that system. So a lot of problems there. I know we're not the only ones that spoke up. If you read through the comment periods, there's a lot of cybersecurity folks in there that really have a problem with this. But unfortunately, as I said, we lost, and it looks like we're going forward. And so this is going to add a lot of complexity to firms in how we're going to defend them. And the last thing I'm talking about is record keeping. So, with this new regulation, I think we're looking at a 5-year period. The things mentioned are going to be the different versions of the policies and procedures manual. So whenever you're crafting that, I recommend, a lot of people are using Office 365. Use something that documents those versions for you and keeps copies of those so that you can go as part of your review. Of course, your annual review documentation. So at least annually, you're going to need to be doing your audits. If you have custody of assets, you're going to want to be doing penetration tests, your vulnerability scans, any regulatory filings you have related to cyber incidents, your written risk and threat assessment reports. So those are usually done annually, kind of depending on the firm. It's always kind of a scale. If I have a firm that comes to me and they say, oh, we're running Bitcoin mines out of the founder's home, we need to be doing weekly audits, right? If they come to me and say, hey, all we do is financial planning, we have no custody of assets, we have no links to accounts, we're definitely just going to do an annual audit, and we're not going to jump in as frequently, not an annual audit, an annual written risk and threat assessment report. So each firm's a little bit different. I think it's just sitting back and thinking about your risk. If you guys are, I'm not sure of the average size of the firm here, but if you have custody of assets, it definitely takes a little more diligence and making sure that you're covering all the corners of your network and your domain. And the last thing is board approval of all cyber docs. So again, we're going to want to see executive involvement at every level. So anytime you make a changes to the policies and procedures, have someone sign off on it, that you've explained it to them, what's going on. Anytime, oftentimes I'm hired by the IT guy, and when we do our presentations, we definitely insist that we have some of the executives in the room just so they can understand as well what their IT department is doing. In some ways we can be a report card for that and say, hey, here's a couple things that we think the IT department should change, and we can leave those executives with a checklist so that they know, hey, in 1 week I need to make sure this is done, in 3 weeks we want to verify this is done, so on and so forth. So just making sure you're doing good record keeping. I mean, it's the SEC, disclosure and compliance is everything, or disclosure and record keeping is everything. So make sure you have a system to do a good job with that. I think a lot of times that can even tie into, your current workflows for how you're currently documenting other, maybe your regular policies and procedures manual, your business continuity plan, et cetera. Pretty short one today, guys. I just wanted to kind of give you an overview of, how I think about the documents and how I think you guys should think about them in terms of having them flow together. Whether you hire us or another third party or you do this internally, I think you'd be hard pressed to find a different workflow to build this in a way that works for most firms in terms of conserving time and employee energy and things of that nature. So of course, I'd love to help you guys. If anyone needs any help, please feel free to reach out. Email or telephone's the easiest way to get me. And we can certainly help out with any situations you may have in your firm. So you may have heard in the beginning, I'm going to have a recording of this, so I'll get that put out to you guys here probably within the next 24 hours. If you need to pass it around, certainly feel free to do that. Again, thank you so much for attending. I certainly appreciate it, and look forward to talking to you guys in the future.